You know they hurt you, yet here you are, staring at your phone, thinking about texting them again. Your mind replays the memories, not the pain, but the moments that felt warm, safe, and real. It doesn't make sense. You remember how they made you feel small, confused, and uncertain. And still, something inside you pulls you back. This is the beginning of a quiet conflict between logic and emotion. One part of you wants to move on, while another part refuses to let go. And that tension is where the real story begins, deeper than you might expect. You try to distract yourself, but your thoughts keep returning to them. Not the arguments or the pain, but the rare moments when things felt right. Your brain filters the memories, highlighting comfort and ignoring chaos. This selective recall creates a distorted emotional reality. You begin to question yourself. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you lost something meaningful. These thoughts don't come from clarity. They come from a deeper psychological process that reshapes memory to protect emotional attachment. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to miss a version of them that never truly existed in a stable way. Your mind doesn't replay the full story. It fragments it. Small pieces of warmth, moments of connection, and emotional highs begin to stand out more than the pain. This is how the brain preserves attachment. It prioritizes emotionally charged memories, especially the ones that felt rewarding. Over time, these fragments form a narrative that feels real but incomplete. You're not remembering the relationship as it was. You're remembering how it felt in its best moments. And that difference is subtle, but powerful enough to keep you emotionally tied to someone who was never consistently good for you. When you think about them, you're not just remembering them. You're remembering who you were when things felt good. The version of you that felt wanted, seen, and emotionally alive. That reflection becomes part of the attachment. You begin to associate them with a better version of yourself. And losing them feels like losing that version too. This is why it feels deeper than just missing a person. It feels like something inside you is missing. But what you're really missing is a temporary emotional state that your brain has linked to them. There's a constant pull inside you. Logic tells you to move on. Emotion tells you to hold on. And both feel real. This internal split happens because different parts of your brain are responding differently. Your rational mind sees the harm, the inconsistency, the instability. But your emotional system remembers the connection, the intensity, the moments of closeness. These systems don't always agree. And when they conflict, it creates confusion. You're not indecisive. You're experiencing two different truths at the same time, and your brain is trying to resolve the tension between them. The attachment you feel is not random. It's built on emotional intensity. Moments where you felt deeply connected activate powerful neural pathways. Your brain releases dopamine during those moments, reinforcing the experience. Even if those moments were rare, they become significant. Your mind holds on to them, associating that person with emotional reward. Over time, this creates a bond that feels stronger than logic. You're not just remembering them. You're remembering how your brain felt in those moments. And that feeling becomes something your mind keeps trying to return to again and again. You may think this is about one person, but it's often a repeating pattern. The same emotional cycle shows up in different forms, with different people. The details change, but the feeling remains the same. This is how the brain operates. It follows familiar patterns, even when they're unhealthy. Because familiarity feels predictable, and predictability feels safe. So without realizing it, you step into the same emotional loop again and again. Not because you want pain, but because your brain recognizes the pattern and mistakes it for something it can understand and control. One of the strongest reasons you can't let go is because something feels unfinished. You didn't get clear answers. You didn't get closure. The ending wasn't complete. And your brain doesn't like incomplete patterns. It keeps trying to resolve them. This is called an open loop. And until it feels resolved, your mind keeps returning to it. Not because the person is right for you, but because the story doesn't feel finished. So you keep thinking, replaying, imagining different outcomes, trying to close something that was never clearly ended. Even after everything, part of you still believes it could work. That maybe things could be different. This hope doesn't come from reality. It comes from the moments that felt real. Your brain clings to those moments as proof of potential. And that potential keeps the attachment alive. It creates a belief that what you felt once could return again. But potential is not the same as consistency. And your brain struggles to separate the two. So it holds on to possibility, even when the pattern shows something completely different. So even when you try to move forward, something inside you pulls back. It's not weakness. It's conditioning. Your brain is trying to return to what feels familiar, even if it was painful. That pull is automatic, deeply wired through repeated emotional experience. But awareness changes everything. The moment you begin to see the pattern, you create distance from it. And that distance is the first step toward breaking it. Because once you understand why you feel this way, you stop blindly following it, and start choosing something different. You begin to question what you actually miss. Not the person, but the feeling. The late-night conversations, the moments you felt seen, the emotional intensity that made everything feel real. Writing these thoughts down helps you separate the person from the experience. Your brain starts to shift from emotional reaction to observation. This process activates your rational thinking, allowing you to see patterns instead of just feelings. Slowly, you realize that what you miss is not them, but how your mind responded in certain moments. And that awareness begins to weaken the emotional hold they still have on you. When you look at the full picture, something shifts. You remember not just the warmth, but also the confusion, the inconsistency, the emotional distance. Your brain tends to highlight positive memories because they carry emotional weight. But when you consciously bring in the painful moments, the story becomes balanced. This isn't about forcing negativity. It's about seeing reality clearly. And when both sides are visible, the illusion begins to fade. You stop romanticizing what hurt you, and instead, you understand it as a pattern that never truly gave you the stability you were looking for. There are moments when the urge to reach out feels overwhelming. Your body feels restless, your thoughts become louder, and the silence feels heavy. This is emotional withdrawal. Your brain is reacting to the absence of a pattern it was used to. Instead of escaping it, you sit with it. You observe the feeling without acting on it. This creates a pause between impulse and behavior. And in that pause, something changes. The intensity begins to fade. Not instantly, but gradually. And each time you resist the urge, you weaken the cycle that once controlled you. The urge to text them doesn't mean you should. It means your brain is trying to return to what it knows. That impulse feels urgent, but it's temporary. When you pause and observe it instead of acting, you interrupt the automatic pattern. Your brain begins to learn that it doesn't need that person to resolve the feeling. This is how control slowly returns. Not by forcing yourself to stop caring, but by choosing not to act on every emotional signal. Over time, your responses change. And with that, the pattern starts to lose its power over you. You begin to introduce new experiences into your life. Not intense ones, not chaotic ones, but steady and calm. At first, they feel unfamiliar, almost empty. But this is where change begins. Your brain starts forming new associations. It learns that calm doesn't mean boring. It means safe. These small, consistent experiences begin to rebuild your emotional baseline. Slowly, your nervous system adjusts. What once felt uncomfortable becomes natural. And what once felt normal, the chaos, the inconsistency, starts to feel exhausting instead of exciting. You start experiencing connection in a different way. Conversations that are calm, honest, and consistent. No guessing, no emotional highs and lows. At first, it may not feel intense, but it feels clear. And clarity brings a different kind of comfort. Your brain begins to recognize this as a new form of safety. One that doesn't require anxiety to feel meaningful. This is how your internal definition of connection begins to change. Not through force, but through repeated experience of something better, something stable, something that doesn't make you question yourself. You begin to reconnect with yourself. Not the version of you that existed in that relationship, but the one that exists without it. Your identity becomes clearer. You start to see your value without needing someone else to reflect it back to you. This shift is subtle but powerful. Because the more you understand yourself, the less you depend on unstable connections to feel something. Your emotional center moves inward. And from that place, your choices begin to change. You no longer chase what feels intense. You begin to choose what feels right. Breaking the pattern doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. Small decisions where you choose differently. Each time you don't go back, each time you sit with a discomfort, each time you choose clarity over confusion, you step further out of the loop. And eventually, the pattern loses its hold. Not because it disappears, but because you no longer respond to it the same way. You've changed, and that change shifts everything. The cycle that once felt impossible to escape becomes something you've outgrown. You begin to feel something different. Not intense, not overwhelming, but steady. A quiet sense of peace. This is what emotional safety feels like. It doesn't spike. It doesn't crash. It stays. And your brain begins to trust it. This is the new pattern forming. One built on consistency, clarity, and self-awareness. It may not feel exciting at first, but it's real. And over time, it becomes more fulfilling than anything unstable ever was. Because it doesn't come with confusion. It comes with understanding, and that changes how you experience connection entirely. You're not the same person who was stuck in that cycle. You've seen the pattern. You've understood it. And now, you're choosing differently. The past doesn't disappear, but it loses its control. You no longer feel pulled in the same way. Because now, you know what that feeling really is. And that knowledge creates freedom. Not instantly, but gradually. Step by step, your mind rewires, your emotions settle, and your direction becomes clear. You're not just moving on. You're moving forward with awareness, and that changes everything. You begin to notice your choices more clearly. The same emotional paths that once felt automatic now appear in front of you as decisions. One path leads back to what feels familiar, intense, unpredictable, and emotionally draining. The other feels calm, stable, and uncertain in a different way. For the first time, you pause. Not reacting, but choosing. This moment is small, but powerful. Because awareness turns unconscious patterns into conscious decisions. And once you can see both paths clearly, you're no longer trapped inside the loop. You have the ability to choose something different, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop feeding the pattern that keeps you stuck. You don't have to erase the memories or force yourself to feel nothing. Instead, you place those emotions somewhere safe, without letting them control your actions. This is a quiet form of release. One that respects what you felt, but doesn't allow it to define your future. Your brain begins to understand that connection doesn't require attachment to pain. And slowly, the emotional intensity fades, replaced by something more stable and grounded. You start to feel more grounded. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer reacting to every emotional impulse. Your breath slows, your thoughts become clearer, and your body feels less tense. This is what happens when your nervous system begins to regulate itself again. You're no longer in a constant state of emotional fluctuation. Instead, you experience moments of calm that feel steady and real. And in those moments, you realize something important. Peace doesn't come from another person. It comes from how you relate to your own thoughts and emotions. You begin to trust yourself again. Your decisions feel clearer. Your emotions feel more understandable. You're no longer questioning your worth based on how someone else treated you. That shift changes everything. Because when you trust yourself, you don't chase confusion. You recognize it and step away. This is not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming aware. Aware of what feels right, what feels wrong, and what no longer deserves your energy. And from that awareness, a new sense of confidence begins to grow quietly within you. There comes a moment where you stop waiting. You stop hoping they'll change, or that things will somehow become different. You accept what the pattern has shown you. And from that acceptance, you make a decision. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. You remove what keeps pulling you back. This action is simple, but it represents something deeper. You're no longer trying to fix the past. You're protecting your future. And that shift marks the beginning of real change, where your actions finally align with what you know is true. The emotional hold begins to weaken. Not because you forgot, but because you stopped reinforcing it. Each step forward creates distance between you and the pattern. And with that distance, your mind becomes clearer. You start to see the relationship for what it truly was, not just how it felt in certain moments. This clarity brings relief. Not intense relief, but steady understanding. The kind that doesn't disappear. And as that understanding grows, the attachment slowly loses its grip, allowing you to move forward without being pulled back. You begin to experience connection in a new way. Without confusion. Without emotional extremes. It feels different, slower, but real. At first, it may not feel as intense. But it feels safe. And that safety allows something deeper to grow. Your brain starts to recognize this as a healthier form of connection. One that doesn't rely on unpredictability to feel meaningful. And over time, this new experience becomes your reference point. Not the past. Not the chaos. But something steady, something clear, something that doesn't come with emotional cost. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It grows slowly, like something that needs time and attention. Each small choice, each moment of awareness, adds to that growth. Your brain begins forming new patterns, new associations, new ways of responding. The old ones don't disappear instantly, but they become weaker. And eventually, they stop controlling your behavior. What replaces them is something more stable. A sense of self that isn't dependent on emotional chaos. And from that place, your relationships begin to change naturally, without force or confusion. There are moments now where you feel calm without needing anything to happen. No messages, no validation, no emotional spikes. Just stillness. And in that stillness, you feel okay. This is new. But it's real. Your brain has adjusted. It no longer needs intensity to feel alive. It has learned that peace can also be meaningful. And that shift changes how you experience everything. You're no longer chasing something outside of you. You're experiencing something within you. And that makes all the difference. You no longer feel the same pull. The thoughts may still appear, but they don't control you. You see them for what they are, patterns, not truths. And that awareness creates distance. You're no longer reacting automatically. You're choosing consciously. And with each choice, your confidence grows. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. The kind of confidence that comes from understanding yourself. From knowing what you've been through, and choosing something better. And that quiet strength becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. You take a moment to pause. To breathe. To notice how far you've come. The intensity has softened. The confusion has cleared. And in its place, there is understanding. You didn't just move on. You learned. You saw the pattern, you felt it, and you chose to step out of it. That's not easy. But it's real growth. And now, your mind is quieter. Not empty, but calm. And that calm becomes something you can return to, again and again, without needing anything external to create it. You don't miss them the same way anymore. Not because they didn't matter, but because you understand what it really was. The pattern, the attachment, the emotional loop. And once you understand something deeply, it loses its power over you. You're no longer trying to go back. You're moving forward. With clarity, with awareness, and with a sense of direction that wasn't there before. This is not the end of a story. It's the beginning of a different one. One where you choose what feels right, not just what feels familiar.